My name is Cameron Stewart. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Manager here at SolarEdge, and thank you for coming to our Expert Spotlight. We have Mike Patterson with us. We're going to talk about how to speed up installations. So Mike is the CEO of Patriot Energy, based in Florida. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, so I started actually, got in the solar industry by accident. Didn't like all the conflicting answers I was getting when I was a customer, and my background was engineering, so I started digging into it myself. And one thing led to another, and I got in the industry. Started KLN Solar originally, which we're rebranding now to Patriot Energy because we specialize in energy security, doing a lot of battery backups, a lot of the more complex systems, and it's really gone well getting in that niche market.
Nice. Well, thank you for joining us in California today. I know it was a long way for you to travel, but we're super happy to have you here. And what is the typical installation for Patriot? You specialize in complex installations?
Yeah, so we do a lot of the complex systems, a lot of the battery backup systems. People who are really looking to secure their homes, with all the hurricanes we get, and everybody moving to Florida, overtaxing the grid, we're having a lot of brownout issues. So we're doing systems that are either fairly large, 20, 30 kW roof mounts, ground mounts, bringing in batteries, bringing in some smart home components, integrating generators with the batteries, just trying to keep my install crews on their toes.
Absolutely. And with those complex systems, I think it's important to remember that we're not selling just solar panels on a roof anymore.
Right.
We're selling whole ecosystems.
Yeah.
And so we're selling batteries and inverters and car chargers and optimizers and now load control devices, communication devices. And so having one ecosystem or architecture that all feeds into the same home, how valuable is that to speeding up your installation?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge just in terms of the value it adds to the system. When we're not really getting the customer who's, hey, I want to save $100 this month. We're getting the customer who's really just trying to secure and fortify their homes and give them that whole package deal of, okay, you're going to produce your energy, you're going to store your energy, we're going to keep your house online when the power goes out, but we're also going to make this kind of as mindless as possible for you, where I don't need you going outside and fiddling with your breakers just because it's getting a little cloudy. It's going to happen automatically.
Right.
Or you can plug your car in, it'll know when to charge based on what's happening outside. Are your batteries full? Is there surplus sunlight? Having all of that be automatic and just making these systems as simple as possible for the homeowners, that's adding a ton of value and giving us a really good competitive advantage.
Awesome. That's exactly what I think. So with SolarEdge, we're able to do that because, again, we provide all the components. We're streamlining your warranty, a single vendor. What does that do for your business when someone calls in and says, I'm having a hard time with my battery?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you kind of the business side and the personal side. On the business side, it's great because no matter where I need support from, or, is it the battery, is it the inverter, is it the charger, whatever it is, I have one number to call. We've got one person to come out and take a look. We're not having the issue of, okay, the battery's not working, so the battery company comes out and, okay, it was actually an inverter issue, so now we have to go and call them. And, we're not playing that game of trying to figure out who is responsible. Whose warranty is it? Whose tech support is it going to be? It's all one person.
Right.
And then just personally from the customer side, my first system, I had a Tesla battery and a SolarEdge inverter. And the Tesla app kind of tried to guess what the solar production was, but it wasn't as accurate, it wasn't as detailed. So if I wanted to see how the solar was doing, I had to look in one app. If I wanted to see what the battery was doing, control the battery, I had to look in another app. Whereas now I have everything just in my SolarEdge app, and I can see and control everything in one place. It's much simpler.
Absolutely. So one software suite to control everything, whether it's your EV charger, your batteries, your inverter, just one software suite, one warranty. Yep. So you're calling SolarEdge for your warranty. Like you said, one number to call. What about training? How do you feel about going through like a Tesla training and then a SolarEdge training and then whatever have you? Yeah. What do you think about the SolarEdge training?
So I like that it's all in one place, right? So if I want to learn about, let's say you have a new inverter coming out, we want to see what's different in terms of what it can do, how we install it, how we sell it, etc. But then we also want to see about all this new smart home equipment that's coming out. Okay, they might be separate trainings, but they're in one place, one portal.
Exactly.
I don't have to remember a bunch of different login infos and different websites and bounce all over the place.
Exactly. So with one ecosystem and just one manufacturer, it enables you to streamline your business and onboard your employees and your installers. So let's talk about when an installer needs some help. And so they've done the training, but they're out in the field, maybe they're new. We just launched our new installation toolkit where they can open up their phone app and see exactly what to do. It's a checklist. Have you used this yet?
Yeah, so I'll say I think I'm spoiled. I think I have one of the best installer crews in the country. But like I kind of joked about, I like to keep them on their toes. We do a lot of the really complex systems and things that had just been launched and brand new features. We're out there selling them right away. So whenever we get these almost one-off or new or more complicated type installation scenarios, it's really nice that they can just go on there and take a look. They're not sitting there trying to call a phone number, trying to get somebody to come out. We don't have to schedule one of your field techs to come out necessarily. They can go in there and see instructions, see diagrams, see maybe a video.
Right.
And most of the time that seems to fill the need.
Absolutely. I'm always a big fan of self-service, being able to do something myself. So instead of calling SolarEdge and waiting on hold, I can open up my phone app and see the exact step that I'm on, watch a video, see a schematic, whatever it may be, and then move on to the next step and continue my installation. So with SolarEdge, we also have what we call more power, more places, because we're controlling solar panels on the roof with the power optimizers. We're controlling our battery down on the ground. We're controlling your EVSE, and it's all DC coupled system, all behind a single breaker, saving on main panel upgrades. Yeah. And what I laugh at all the time is I've been an installer, I've been out in the field, and I see like AC coupled systems with 2 or 4 2-pole breakers, and I can't remember the last time I opened up a panel and saw just 4 empty slots ready and waiting for me. When was the last time you saw that?
All the time. All of our new construction, they're putting 400 amp panels in. So
400 amp.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we don't get a lot of 400 amp panels in California, so you are a little spoiled. Yeah. With the electrification of the grid, maybe that's going to change, but we have to be ready to have a single breaker, just saving on main panel upgrades for all the homes that are already built, right? And so we have a lot of 100 amp panels out there, and so you can put what we call the 3.876. which is a 3.8 kilowatt inverter when it's grid connected. And then when it goes into backup mode, it can act as a 7.6. And the beautiful thing about this is there's no main panel upgrade. It still complies with the 120% rule. You can put a battery on it, you can put an EVSE on it, and it's just a great way to save time, cost, and money. So SolarEdge has a lot of great algorithms for time of use profiles, for maximized self-consumption. We're launching for NEM 3. Have you heard of NEM 3?
I have. Moved into California just for it.
Awesome. All right. So I'm glad to hear you're in California, because NEM 3, what's going to be the critical aspect for success in California market?
Harvesting your energy when you're overproducing rather than selling it at essentially worthless value.
Right.
So storing it, batteries. And then also the system being smart enough to know not only when to use it from the battery versus when to take it from the grid, but even if we're starting in the smart home aspects, when to run certain appliances.
Exactly.
What's the value of that energy produced? What's the value of that energy bought? And with that varying throughout the day, it's too much for someone to manually control it themselves.
Exactly. So we developed a complicated algorithm, and so we call it BMA, or battery management algorithm, because we don't have a fancy name for it yet. We're still working on that, but we'll get a fancy name soon. So what the battery management algorithm does, it's more than a maximized self-consumption. It is an algorithm that is designed to look at the export rate. So how much energy, how much is the value of energy you're selling to the grid? It looks at predictive elements. What is the weather forecast for the next 3 days? And then it looks at learning elements for how much energy is the home consuming. And based on all that information, we tell the battery when to charge and then how to discharge. And so a good example is if your export rate is low, we will charge the battery and offset on peak time. So we'll just do maximize self-consumption. But if the export rate is high, then we will dispatch as much energy to the grid as possible. So I like to run through a couple of examples of how our battery management algorithm does this. because I always get questions about the behavior. Like, how does it know what to do? And so let's just look at the example. Let's consider a PG&E where the peak hours are from 4 to 9, but we're in September, which is what we call the power hours, and we have a really high export rate, $2.60 per kilowatt hour from 6 to 7, and $2.90 per kilowatt hour from 7 to 8. All right, so 2-hour window. And that if you're familiar with California, you should know what this is. All right, so the dream example is what you see here on the screen. We have a homeowner that has an EV. They charge their EV at night. So that's this big red peak that you see at from midnight to roughly 1 a.m. All right, so they're charging their car at night. Fantastic. They don't use very much energy. The battery charges, and then we can see at 6 o'clock, boom, all of that battery energy dispatches to the grid. We maximize our export, and we're raking in cash. That's the dream example. That's how we want our homeowners to behave, right?
Absolutely.
And do they do that?
No.
No. All right. So let's look at an example of what would happen if a homeowner gets home midday. They plug in their car. Again, to your point of being able to set it and forget it and let the tools do the work for you. So they plug in their car. They need to charge it. So sun comes up. It's powering the home, charging the battery. But the homeowner comes in at 11 a.m. and starts charging their vehicle. Maybe they have to get away for the weekend or something. Okay. So they start charging their car. And we can see this big peak from about 11 to 5 o'clock-ish, where they're charging their vehicle. They're using all of their solar energy, and we started dispatching battery energy to help offset charging the car. But then we realized that we're not going to have enough energy in the battery for the export. So what the BMA does is it sacrifices buying grid energy to charge the car so we can charge the battery with solar energy, right? And then once we have solar energy in the battery, we can sell it to the grid from 6 to 8. And we see this big peak from 6 to 8 o'clock where we're dispatching energy to the grid. And again, maximizing our investment.
Yeah, getting the most value for it.
Getting the most value for it. Okay, there's one more example. And I always get this question. What happens when my homeowner is using a ton of energy during the power hours, right? And it's a funny thing to ask, but we have to talk about it. All right, so what happens? Homeowner comes home. They're like, I have a hot date. I need to plug in my car. Yep. So they start charging at 5 p.m., an hour before the power hours, and their car is taking in 10 kilowatts. So what happens? So as you predict, the BMA tries to do its best.
Yep.
But there's nothing we can do if the home is consuming more energy than we're capable of delivering out of the inverter, right? So unfortunately, on this day, the homeowner missed out on their power hours because they prioritized charging their car. Yep. So the flexibility of the algorithm is we will do everything for you, right? But we have to help our homeowners make better decisions. You know, what's the best way to do that? Coaching.
Yep. So while you're talking to them, set the expectations, teach them what the system's going to do, and coach their behaviors. So yeah, there might be a time that they need to charge their car at that point. But could they have charged it more the night before or something like that to have some battery capacity left? And just knowing what a huge opportunity that window, specifically in September, is, and how much more return on investment they're going to get when they can sell back then. And you teach them about those dollars and cents because that's what's motivating most of these people. I think somebody doing this scenario, maybe they're reckless, but maybe they just don't know what they're doing.
Right.
They weren't coached properly. They weren't told how the system was going to work. They thought it's just going to, do its thing in the background. They'll never have to think about it, and they're losing out on a factor of 6, if I'm doing my math right, value compared to what it's costing them to produce the energy.
Right. They could have actually gone down the road and charged at a fast charger
for cheaper,
for a lot less money.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So coaching and teaching your customers how the system works is going to be paramount. But even then, sometimes that isn't enough. So SolarEdge has a load controller. I'll come back to this slide in a second. SolarEdge has a load controller. And what the load controller does is we can say, I want to turn off these loads during specific times of the day. And so that may be, you can put it on a pool pump, and you can say, I don't want my pool pump to run at all during on-peak time, even like for the entire year.
Right.
So you can save, from 4 to 9 p.m. every day of the year. I want my pool pump to be off. You can put it on a dryer and say, oh yeah, during the power hours, I absolutely do not want the dryer to be turned on. And you can take the guessing game away from the homeowners. And so the load controller has the ability to not only manage grid connected loads, like when you're on grid for time of use arbitrage, but it can also shed loads as non-essential when you go into backup. So making those smaller backup systems more capable and preventing homeowners from depleting their batteries very quickly because you can just load shed.
Yeah, that's the biggest value I see to that is we do a lot of backup systems with very large PV, but just because of the cost of batteries, we're looking at 2, maybe 3 batteries on them. So you have much more potential capability during the day on a nice sunny day. And without something like this, depending on AHJ, either you're manually flipping breakers trying to manage your backup, or we just couldn't back that up at all.
Right.
So these are huge. I can't wait to start pushing these out there.
Fantastic. And then one last question we always get is, how does my homeowner enroll in the BMA? How do they set that up? And all they have to do is open up their My SolarEdge app, click on the time of use NEM3, set their utility, and then they're set. Now they're enrolled in BMA. All right, so I think that was the rundown through the entire presentation. Let's go ahead and take some of the questions in that we get over the chat. Please put your questions in so we can answer them. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, what is your feeling about using generators with solar systems today?
So that's kind of a loaded one. We're doing a lot of real disaster security type systems. That's really what we specialize in. I'll tell you, my system has 2 batteries and a 17 kW Generac built into it. Would I have bought a generator to tie into my system? Probably not, but it was already there. So giving myself that third leg of protection is no brainer.
Right.
Now I do like the ability to integrate the portable generators, just because of some of the uncertainty. We've seen some of the recent storms like Harvey, I think, that hit Houston, and it just kind of stopped. So where we're designing the system for a hurricane comes through one day and it blows away and takes all the weather with it, and the sun comes back out, maybe that's not always going to be the case. And being able to have some, couple $100 Harbor Freight generator that you can tie into the system seamlessly and supplement until the sun comes back out, I do like that from the security point of view. But beyond that, we're integrating for people who already have generators. I'm not telling people to go out and bury a propane tank and install a Generac just for that third leg of security when they don't already have it.
Right. So only on an as-needed basis.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get some of the questions on the chat. When I'm troubleshooting a hub system with whole home backup and an LG Chem battery, if I press that on the phone tree, it kicks me to the LG tech support, even if I'm troubleshooting the inverter. So if you're troubleshooting the inverter, of course, you can call SolarEdge tech support. You can chat us online. The reason it's kicking you to the LG support is sometimes the LG battery needs support. So I think it's just maybe when you're clicking the button that you're saying, oh, I'm bypassing inverter troubleshooting and I'm moving on to LG troubleshooting. But we do a lot of support for LG too. So if you're having a communication problem, you can give us a call and we'll walk you through that, especially during setup or troubleshooting to begin with. Any other questions coming in on the chat? Oh, here's another one. Okay, so Mike, you said you install really complicated systems.
Yeah.
You said multiple batteries.
Yes.
Are you using a wired communication or wireless?
So I am really trying to push all my crews to just take the extra time and wire everything. Both a personal preference, and then if we just think demographics, the people who are investing in these security systems, a lot of them don't really trust wireless communications, but from kind of anecdotal experience, I like the reliability of a wired communication system better. I always would rather have a piece of Ethernet connecting than have to worry about wireless communications with interference and losing communication and not being able to have the full functionality of the system just because of a comms error. I will happily have my installer stay there for a little bit of extra time to run a few pieces of Ethernet cable and just get as bulletproof of a system as possible.
Yeah, so I think that's a valid point. So extra time for a hardwired connection comes from how we do our firmware updates.
Yep.
So if we're using a hardwired connection, it's going to be Modbus RS-485, and firmware updates take a lot longer over the baud rate, 9600 baud rate. But when we're using our wireless, our home network, we can push parallel firmware upgrades to all inverters and batteries on the system simultaneously.
Yes.
So firmware upgrades are a lot faster when you're using wireless. There's definitely use cases and advantages to both.
Yep.
And so I always recommend both. In general, I'm going to say if you're installing a single inverter, single battery, maybe you don't need the wireless, the home network. But if you're using multiple inverters, multiple batteries, I'm going to say, yeah, save yourself some time on the back end and definitely use the home network.
It might even be regional to an extent because our houses are primarily concrete, so we run into a lot of issues not having reliable Wi-Fi or even reliable cell comms where we have to put all the equipment.
Yeah.
So
I see another question about the capability and function of generator support. So today, we do allow you to connect a generator directly to the backup interface, and we have 2-wire start-stop capability. So if you were to connect your Generac to the backup interface, you run line 1 and line 2. You can run your neutral and ground, obviously, as well. And then you have to get a 2-wire start kit from Generac. I have a white paper that tells you exactly which 2-wire start kit to get because Generac is going to pretend that they don't know what the backup interface is and they don't want you to do it. So anyway, 2-wire start-stop. Kohler has the 2-wire start-stop integrated, and all you have to do is when the system goes into backup mode, we're going to prioritize using solar and batteries first, and then once the batteries are completely depleted, then we isolate the inverter using an AC relay that's located inside the inverter, and we start the generator. Once you're on generator power and you're still in backup mode, we won't turn off the generator until the grid is restored. So what I advise our customers to do is for today is, okay, conserve as much energy, use batteries as long as you can, especially if you're on an extended outage, and just kind of wait until the last possible minute to run your generator, because when you're on generator, that's a finite fuel resource, right?
Absolutely.
I can usually count on the sun coming up every day, and if the sun's not coming up, I think we have much bigger problems to worry about than how our solar is doing. Okay, so our next firmware update will allow the generator and inverter to operate simultaneously. So that's the next feature that we're waiting for. That's expected in firmware version 4.19, and we'll see that sometime this year. Okay. Next question is, what is the SolarEdge support phone number? I'm sure we can put that into the chat. I don't know it off the top of my head. We'll go ahead and throw that into the chat for everyone to see. Can SolarEdge batteries export in parallel to generator power output? Yeah. So I just answered this question, and basically not yet. With supporting firmware, we'll be able to do that. And of course, you're never allowed to have a generator operating parallel with the grid. So the generator will only operate when the system's in backup mode. Okay. So with the SolarEdge home battery and the inverter, what is the largest backup system that you typically do? You said 20 to 30 kilowatts. Are you using 2 inverters or 3?
Yeah, so on the solar side, I'd say average from the mid-teens to the mid-20s kilowatts for the solar portion. Batteries, we very, very, very seldom ever do a single battery. We're typically looking anywhere between 2 and 4 batteries. And anytime we're over 2, I'm always putting people on at least 2 inverters to maximize the power output. And just in general, especially with the solar intensity in Florida, with some exceptions, and not having to worry about main panel upgrades very often, I keep the DC to AC ratio very, very small. So I'm commonly putting in 2 or more inverters, even if technically on paper 1 would suffice. I'll use 2 smaller ones, just get a little redundancy and a little bit more potential power output in a backup scenario.
Interesting. So instead of let's say a 10 kilowatt inverter, you'll do 2 6s.
So I always look for the ones that have 10 kW off-grid output.
Okay.
So for, an example would be if I had a 12 or 13 kW solar system, instead of putting a single 11.4 on there, I'll just put two 7.610s on it.
Oh, great. Yeah. Because it's a mixed nameplate. So when it's in backup mode, it can do 10 kilowatts. Yeah. And so if you have 4 batteries, you can do 10 kilowatts total, exactly. Which actually answers the next question is, can batteries discharge in parallel? So absolutely. Each battery is rated to 5 kilowatts continuous discharge. And if you stack 2 batteries, well, that power stacks on the DC side. So if your inverter is capable, then we will discharge those batteries simultaneously. So the example I always like to give is the 7.6 because it clearly illustrates the capabilities. So single battery on a 7.6 is 5 kilowatts, and then 2 batteries would be able to do 10, but you're limited by the AC nameplate rating of the inverter. So if you have just the 767, then it's only 7.6 kilowatts continuous with 2 batteries. Versus the 7610, if you're in backup, that's 10 kilowatts capable in backup. So if you have 2 batteries, 10 kilowatts total in backup. All right. Can SE batteries export parallel grid power output? Yes. For whole home backup, AC units, yes. A lot of questions about how the batteries discharge. So I think we got those questions answered. How do you feel about battery chemistry? Have you looked at UL 9540A at all?
Not a ton. Not a ton in terms of the actual specifics on it. I do very much like that they are passively cooled. Removing that point of failure of a cooling fan is a huge feature, having come from another company previously that relied on cooling fans and seeing them fail fairly often. So I like that. I like that you don't need to have the fire extinguishers built into it anymore.
Nice.
Just being an intrinsically safe battery. And then coming from the past, for a career, I was a hazmat tech. So you asked me about chemistries between iron phosphate or nickel cobalt, NCA, whatever it might be. It's such a minute difference in my view. You've got pros and cons to each, right? You've got energy density, you've got charge-discharge cycles. There's a whole lot of factors at play, and at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is what can get me the power I need as quickly as I need it, and who's going to stand behind it and warranty it for the life of the system.
Interesting. So I hear a lot of misconception in the industry saying LFP is safer than NMC. And I always kind of default to saying, well, that's not actually true. And the reason for that is when we build our battery, it's all about construction, right? And there's a test safety, UL 9540A, that tests the safety of the battery. And the analogy I like to run is car crash test safety, right? So when we look at the safest cars in the world, what is the test protocol? They just take a car and slam it into a wall at 100 miles an hour and see what happens. Nowhere in the crash test safety do they look at the fuel type. They don't say, oh, is this a EV? Is this a unleaded gas? Is this diesel? They don't factor that in because they just slam it against the wall to see what happens. And that's what UL 9540A does. They set a battery on fire to see what happens. And SolarEdge has one of the safest batteries in the industry, where when we set our cell on fire, it didn't propagate to anything, no flames came out of the battery. It is a very safe, reliable product, which is why it's so big. We developed a lot of safety into our battery because we want to protect our largest asset, which is our home, and that's why it's important to us. And of course, SolarEdge, as a company in the history of SolarEdge, we prioritize safety with like Safety C, 1 volt AC on the optimizers, just protecting our home and protecting our electricians, our homeowners, all of the above. All right. Energy Bank. Oh, no. Okay. Any more questions coming in? I think we're at the end. We'll have time for one more question if it comes in. I don't see anything else coming in. Mike, any closing words for our audience today?
No, just biggest thing is don't shy away from what might be a complicated system, because if you learn it now when they're somewhat complicated, with the way all the utilities and the regulations are going, you're setting yourself up for when you have to start doing these systems.
Yeah, you heard it from Mike. So, just start installing more batteries.
Exactly.
I mean, like 5.
Yeah.
10?
Everybody gets batteries.
9 is the max. Start selling 9 batteries per job.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you coming out with us. And again, my name is Cameron Stewart. Stay sunny, stay optimized, and we'll see you guys later.